Good morning, my friends. This is Pastor Pete, once again, continuing my study on the Olivet prophecy, Matthew 24 fulfilled. And that is the title of my small group study, which is available on Amazon. And it is a small group study. It's not meant to be a in-depth teaching on the Olivet prophecy of the Olivet discourse found here in Matthew chapter 24 and found in Mark 13 and Luke 21. It is meant to give you the basics. And I hope that your small group would take advantage of it. And the link is in the comments below. Well, hey, we're going over chapter 7 of the book, and the chapters are small because they're meant for small group studies. And we're up to Matthew chapter 24, verse 6. And Jesus tells us there are signs of this coming fulfillment of what he's prophesied already in Matthew 23, that there would be coming judgment on Jerusalem. And in verse 6, he says there would be wars and rumors of wars. Well, you see, the set time had fully come. In Galatians 4:4 reads this way: "But when the set time had fully come, God sent his son, born of a woman, born under the law." Well, you know, these events that Jesus gives us in this prophecy, well, they're all about, they couldn't have come at a different time, because if it was a different time, well, hey, why prophesy wars and rumors of wars? Because at a different time period, there would have been wars going on all around the area, all around the empire. But because of some things that took place during the reign of the emperor that was there at that time, there was relative peace. Peace at the edge of the sword, but there was relative peace. And so now it's going to be something that is going to be unusual for wars and rumors of wars. So let's start there. Let's start right there. Herod the Great was on the throne, so we know when Jesus was born that his birth was probably as early as 6 BC, not at 0 as the Julian calendar gives us. God's appointed time had arrived, and all was prepared for the coming of the Messiah. All was prepared. And Jesus of Nazareth was born in Bethlehem of Judea, part of the Roman Empire. And part of that preparation was the relative peace described as the Pax Romana. The Roman peace. The peace of Rome was held at the point of a sword and spear and terror. But nevertheless, in that world at that time, it was relative peace. The military conquests of Julius Caesar helped him to seize power, according to Thomas Lee and David Allen Black in their New Testament in the background and Message, second edition. The military conquests of Julius Caesar helped him to seize power in Rome. His enemies feared his ambition and successfully plotted his murder in 44 BC. Out of the chaotic struggle for power between rival Roman bodies, Octavian, Caesar's nephew, seized control. He secured his position with a stunning victory over the forces of Antony and Cleopatra in a naval battle near Actium in 31 BC. His victory led Rome from a period of aggressive expansion into a period of relative peace known as the Pax Romana, or Roman peace. Well, hey, there was peace that was uh, at the expense of the sword and terror of Romans, and yeah, they did a lot of bloody things, but there was peace between the nations that made up the empire. Now, in the Olivet Discourse, Jesus prophesies this peace would end. This peace would end. Matthew 24, 6 through 8. You will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you are not alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come. Nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginnings of birth pangs. Well, hey, for those that teach the Bible out of its first century context, you could find wars and rumors of wars down through histories and through history, and you could look at the earthquakes in various places, all of this, and that's what's happened down through the centuries, uh, because people have taken the scriptures out of context and tried to apply them to the news that was going on in their day. But if we go back and apply the scripture to when Jesus wrote these words, it makes a lot more sense. Now, according to Roman historian Tacitus, and I'm not quite there yet, under Tiberius, all was quiet. Now, Tacitus was referring to Judea in this section of history. Emperor Tiberius reigned from 14 AD to around 37 AD. The majority of the earthly ministry of Jesus of Nazareth. And Tacitus continues that, and I didn't put all these on there. Tacitus continues, then when Caligula, 37 to 41, ordered the Jews to set up a statue in their temple, they chose rather to resort to arms, but the emperor's death put an end to their uprising. The princes now being dead or reduced to insignificance, Claudius, in 41 to 54 AD, made Judea a province and entrusted it to Roman knights or to freedmen. One of the latter, Antonius Felix, practiced every kind of cruelty and lust, wielding the power of king with all the instincts of a slave, according to Roman historian Tacitus. So Governor Antonius Felix, as mentioned in the book of Acts, was procurator of Judea from about 52 to 60 AD. He was the brother of Caligula, of Claudius's notorious favorite, Paulus, and it was procurator of Judea, as we said, from 52 to 60, according to Josephus, but seems to have governed the southern half before that time. Well, Tacitus, that Roman historian we've been mentioning, continues. Still the Jews' patience lasted. Still the Jews' patience lasted until Gessius Florus became procurator from 64 to 66. In his time, war began. When Cestius Gallus, governor of Syria, tried to stop it, he suffered various fortunes and met defeat more often than he gained victory. On his death, whether in the course of nature or from vexation, Nero sent out Vespasian, who, aided by his good fortune and reputation, as well as his excellent subordinates, within 2 summers occupied with his victorious army the whole of the level country and all the cities except Jerusalem. The next year was taken up with civil war, and thus was passed in inactivity as far as the Jews were concerned. Again, those are the words of Tacitus. Tacitus telling us from his Roman perspective, okay, so he's awful kind to Vespasian in his words. And yeah, there was a respite during the Jewish war for about a year because uh, Nero was killed and probably murdered, and the Roman Empire just fell apart. And there was a civil war between the many generals of the Roman legions, and Vespasian wins out. Well, hey, there's actually an interesting story about that. It's found in Josephus, War of the Jews. Josephus was a Jewish general who was given charge during the Jewish War of a city called Jotapata. And Vespasian and the Roman legions came against Jotapata, and they mounted a siege against it, a siege preventing anyone from coming in or out, starving them out, literally. And Vespasian heard of this general, Josephus, according to Josephus, that is, and heard that he had made some interesting predictions that seemed to come true. And so when the Romans finally breached the walls of Jotapata, and they found Josephus and his comrades hidden in a cistern, and they're not going to send soldiers down there to die one at a time. So they tried to encourage them to come out. Well, Josephus saying, hey, I'm a Jew, we're Jews, we don't want to be killed by pagan hands, so let's draw lots, and the one who gets this lot will kill this person, and we'll work our way down the list until there's only one of us left, and then, we'll kill ourselves. Well, somehow the last two that were left, Josephus and another Jewish leader, it came down to it, and Josephus talked him out of killing him and killing himself, and they came up out of the cistern. Josephus, of course, as the general, was taken to Vespasian and made this prophecy that Vespasian would become the next emperor of Rome, and endeared himself to Vespasian. And so Vespasian kept him around. And they traveled during the Jewish War. Josephus actually became quite a traitor in the eyes of the Jews, because he tried to talk them out of this war, talk them out of fighting. And so Josephus is not held in very good regard by the Jews. So, but that's an interesting story. And Vespasian did indeed become the next emperor of Rome during this Roman Civil War. More could be said, but notice the timeline. During the reign of Tiberius, when Jesus spoke the words of the Olivet discourse, Judea was at relative peace. Peace at the edge of the sword, forced with cruelty, but a certain level of peace as predicted by Jesus soon after his ascension. And uprisings began in Judea, culminating in the War of the Jews from 66 to 70 AD. While there was a one-year respite during this civil war, Vespasian would send his son Titus to complete the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple. Being that Rome was an empire made of nations, these were certainly nations rising against nations. Yeah, we don't understand the world of the first century. We think of the Roman Empire like we think of the United States. I think too often made up of states, different, but under a federal rule. In the Roman Empire, they were basically nations that were conquered by the Romans, and that made up the empire. And so the empire, wars coming around in the empire, was nations rising against nations. Well, I think I'm a little bit of a stumble today, but made our way through this quick little chapter of chapter 7. And thank you again for allowing me the time to visit with you. And we'll see you soon for chapter 8. Blessings.